Spain have knocked out Sweden to secure their first ever Women's World Cup finals appearance. So let's talk about it. Well, there's certainly plenty to discuss here after Spain defeated Sweden 2-1 in the semi-final round. All three of those goals came in the last 10 minutes, so definitely a very intense and dramatic last 10 minutes of the game. Pretty much the themes of this World Cup, a lot of drama and intensity that you probably cannot blink, even if it's the last 10 minutes of the game. For the majority of the game and leading up to those 80 minutes, it was a pretty split even game. It did look like both sides were a little bit leggy, kind of a little bit tired in some senses, especially that midfield from both teams. Alexia Putellas finally got her 50-ish minutes in, which is great. It's really fantastic to see the Ballon d'Or winner back on the pitch playing all those minutes in a semi-final. Looked like Spain were certainly saving her up to the latter stages, which is good because they needed to manage her minutes and they wanted to make sure obviously no injury would take place, considering she's just coming back from an ACL. Very positive to see her back on the pitch. However, we definitely did not see a lot of her magic because Sweden did a pretty good job maintaining her down, despite Sweden's own midfield not really having their best game either. Asllani was pretty quiet in those first 45 minutes, kind of dropping a little bit too deep, and we've talked a lot about Asllani and her role and kind of how she needed to really step it up, and especially in those big latter stages of the competition. But unfortunately, I think her positioning wasn't where it needed to be, and I think against a Spain midfield like that, you have to be quite aggressive in your positioning and play a little bit higher. Don't think she was able to do that until maybe the second half started to kick in a little bit. There was a lot of transitions. That was clearly what Sweden was trying to do, catch Spain on that transition, move the ball as fast as they could. I think there was some pretty bright combination work from Sweden as well as from Spain, but in a general sense, it was quite even. It could have been anybody's ball game. It could have been anybody's goal to really score first. Rolfo had a very different role, I thought, this game compared to all the other games that we've seen this campaign, more of an attacking kind of a production role, and maybe that could have been highlighted because of Asllani being a little bit too quiet, not being able to intercept the ball or just be on the ball as often as she needed to be. I think this was a clash of styles of football, which you do see quite often. Like Spain and Sweden, on paper, you would expect them to deliver plenty of goals, especially on set pieces for Sweden and open play for Spain, because Spain's XG or expected goals is always like the most ridiculous stat ever. However, it looked like it came down to a clash of styles, of footballing styles, principles and schools is exactly what we saw, just two completely different schools. And what it came down was the last 10 minutes. So the first 80 minutes didn't really matter because those last 10 minutes were exactly what decided the entire game. 19-year-old Sema Paralelo obviously stealing the show once again. She was the main woman to take Spain to their first ever semi-final in a major competition after scoring that winner against Dutch in the quarterfinals, and it looked like she had similar plans on her mind. Coming on as an impact sub, what I do really like about her coming on as an impact sub is she offers a lot of direct work and a lot of direct attack. That is something that Spain often lack, and especially on those final stages of just being direct with your shots, being direct with how you build up, being direct with where you're putting the ball is such an important thing that the Spanish team consistently lacks, that she provides at such a brutal and clinical fashion. She's very tall, she's very fit, she's very well built, so even shall a corner take place in the 90th minutes for Sweden, this is a player that you can kind of count on of matching some of those heights from the opposition. And then 7 minutes later, Rebecca Blomqvist gets the equalizer for Sweden, and then literally 49 seconds later, Olga Carmona with a banger of a goal from outside the box to win it for Spain. So the Spain goal scorers were a 19-year-old Selma and a 23-year-old Olga. It continues to be the youngsters and the teenagers in this case for Selma. Teenage dreams are hard to beat. You could argue that Musevic could have done slightly better to save that Olga goal, but it did look like there is probably every single player in front of her and her sight was likely blocked. And this is usually not even an attacking pattern that we see Spain do, of like laying it off on the side of the box and taking a shot from there. It looked like it could have been a heat of the moment for the Spanish players there, and they saw the opportunity and took it. Another thing that we haven't yet seen from the Spanish side until now, and what I've kind of been enjoying from these players exactly, is in the quarterfinals we saw that direct work from Salma that we haven't necessarily seen before from Spain. This time around, we're seeing a little bit different kind of resolutions at the end. They're not still sticking with their fancy playing football, their fancy let's pass here and there to get a goal. Sometimes in those moments in the 89th minute, you just need to take a shot, and you know you've got the talent to do that. You know you've got the finishers to do that. Do it. And that is exactly what Spain has lacked in those final bits here and there in every single competition that they've been knocked out in the quarterfinals and whatever it may have been. Right now, we're seeing a Spanish side that's showing adaptability. Those players are showing signs that they can adapt in those final moments. For Sweden, they're always the bridesmaid, never the bride. They're always the princess, never the queen, and it is such a shame to continuously seeing them podium. I mean, they still have a chance to podium for that bronze, but Sweden is a team that is yelling for that golden medal. This is their 4th World Cup semi-final. They're World Cup finalists that lost it to Germany in 2003. They were semi-finalists in the Euros last year. They're always so close to that golden and silver medal, but just never there. And we finally got to see them get their hands on a gold or a silver medal. They were very close to getting gold medal in the Olympics, which they lost to Canada. And again, that was a game that came down to very razor thins. And it's so interesting because Sweden is such a good tournament team, yet when it comes to the final margins and those, I mean, just tournament football, razor thin key factors, they just are not able to steal it. And it's such a weird thing to continuously see happen again and again and again. And like a lot of these players, you'd expect them to have maybe gone to Euros in their pocket or, you know, at least a World Cup in there, but just nothing. It's the players said it in the press conference afterwards that they're tired of crying semi-final tears, and I think any Swedish fan would be feeling just the same. And to have lost it to a Spanish side, that they should have capitalized on some of their mistakes and some of their fallbacks. And I think what frustrated me more is Japan showed us a perfect tutorial of how to exploit that Spanish back line, and Sweden kind of had that tutorial laid in front of them. And I understand Japan and Sweden play very different football, but in some ways you should have looked at it and been like, man, those through balls between X and Y defender could have worked. Didn't look like Sweden were attempting those, which is kind of what was so frustrating. I hope Sweden are able to pick themselves up and fight for that bronze regardless of who the opposition is. They deserve to podium a World Cup, and specifically this World Cup, after knocking out the US and Japan back to back. Not many teams could have done that. Only Sweden did. For Spain, this is such a bittersweet feeling, and I spent the entire morning following that game speaking to certain journalists in Spain, specifically those located in Barcelona, to kind of see what the effect is or how they've been previewing this entire situation in Spain, because they probably get to see the effects firsthand before anybody else and better than anybody else. From pretty much every single person that I spoke to, I got the feeling that everybody back in Spain seems to be split in terms of how they want to support or how they want to root on their team. A big chunk doesn't know how to support the team because they're afraid that that support becomes misplaced later on, and others are just happy to see their team doing what they're doing and kind of forgetting the context of what the situation is currently right now. I will be leaving and linking some very valuable articles, including some of my videos where I did discuss the situation going on with the RFEF, the Spanish Federation, and the players leading up to the World Cup. I don't want to make this entire video about it, just very, very brief context. Leading up to the World Cup at the end of last year, around October, the players, or about 15 players from the Spanish team, voiced that they wanted the removal of Vilda due to some various reasons. They had issues with the communication, they had issues with how the planning of camps worked, they had issues with the preparation ideas in terms of the analysis work, and the meeting analysis didn't usually have video analysis, and they kind of had to sit there and listen. They often felt that their feedback and whatever that they had to voice to their head coach wasn't listened to. There's some tactics and rules that their head coach Vilda would have laid out for them during camp that they didn't necessarily feel comfortable with abiding. It really just did not look like a very good environment, an often toxic environment described by those players. 15 of those players stepped down, protesting and fighting for the removal of Vilda. Vilda is a very powerful man, backed up by a lot of the people in the federation. In fact, his own father works in the federation, specifically for the women's side. Really nothing was voiced for the players. The players were labeled as brats, as rebels, and none of their concerns were properly adhered by. Vilda's continuously in his position. A few weeks out of the World Cup, some of the players declared themselves available and have been called back into the squad and are currently at the World Cup. Some of those names that you see are the likes of Alexia Putellas, Caldente, as well as Aitana Bonmati, others that have not responded to this call out, obviously with the big one being Matt Pillion. So the situation here is really at what cost? At what cost was the protest dropped by some of these players? At what cost should we be supporting Spain? And at what cost do we want to see Spain win a World Cup final? That's a big question. Those are three big questions that I think are very hard to answer. It's very hard to know how the players really feel about it because the media has been quite good in making sure that some outlets support Vilda and some other outlets don't really support Vilda. There's a player from those players that came back just in a press conference a few days before the Sweden game said that, if you go on to win something, this was all worth it, which is extremely troubling because it tolerates Vilda being there and it tolerates his toxic environment and it tolerates his 7-year tenure of being there, even though this is his first ever semi-final and a final at a major competition. Any manager of any federation would have been gone long ago. If it wasn't for the support and the backing and probably his father being in the federation, he would have not been here for as long as he's been here. This game and the game before it was won on individual brilliance. This has nothing to do with Vilda's tactics. If anything, this is actually exactly out of Vilda's tactics. You can tell with a lot of these huddles that happen mid-game, at the end of the game, the players are celebrating and talking together. Vilda is clearly out of the picture, and it does seem like the players have gone in here. Again, I do recognize that a big part of it is a personal choice to come back to the squad, and many others that I highly commend. I mean, the likes of Matt Pillion is a player that we deserve to see at a World Cup, and her herself deserves to have a triumph of a World Cup. Absolutely, Matt Pillion is that player. She's recognized and spoke about that this is a much better fight than right now. This is not just today's environment. It's the environment of the players that are going to come up after us. It's the environment of the federation that's going to provide for the youngsters in the youth stages. This is a much bigger fight than today in this senior squad, which is something that you absolutely have to commend Matt Pillion and the few others that are sitting out about this. Not a lot of players get a chance to go to the World Cup, and when you've got a player like her putting the World Cup aside to fight for a bigger cause than herself and a bigger cause than this current team, this is a player that you have to just sit back and respect and clap your hands up for. And I really hope following this World Cup, regardless of what Spain achieves and regardless of what they win, if it's a silver or gold, I really hope the players are able to take that medal and go to the federation and be like, we got this medal despite the environment that we've been in, despite the fight that we have to go through, despite everything that we had to endure leading up to the World Cup, probably including the World Cup experience in a general sense. Really, we got this piece of silverware. We'll be stepping down from international duty until our concerns and our voices are heard. Point blank, this is, I believe, what the players should be doing, and this is how they should be using their platform. It looked like maybe when they initiated the protest in October, it was maybe a little bit too soon or too close to the World Cup, but regardless of how we word the situation, it's a very crappy one. We want to support the players because those are some fantastic athletes that deserve to be at the big stage, but at the same time, it's important that that federation doesn't use that support as a validation to what they've done and to what structure they've put in, which clearly is not the structure that these players feel comfortable working around. Sure, I want to see Esther Gonzalez win a trophy. Same thing with Salma Paralelo. I mean, she's kind of deserved it, being such a big player in the big stage. But at what cost? Does this mean the next Salma Paralelo, the next 19-year-old, is going to deal with this toxic environment? Because then I don't want it. Who wants that? So it's a very complicated situation, and it's very, very unfortunate that with every single women's national team, it comes with context that makes it a little bit more complicated. It comes with rooted misogyny in the federation. I will say it as is. It's so disheartening to see this after every win. It's like, where do we put our support? It's like, we want to support the players, but the federation is like right there blocking us from doing so. It'll be very interesting to see. Like I mentioned, I'll be leaving a lot of articles and resources, including some of my videos that I've done on the channel speaking about this down below. So definitely check them out. Read a little bit more. Definitely, I do encourage to understand what is going on leading into the final. But as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on Spain, on Sweden, on the semi-final, how it went. What a ridiculous 10 last minutes that was. Your feelings around Spain heading into the final, given the context that we are in. And as always, to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. And I will see you later.